Hello friends, this is Cherie from the Bayou Homestead. It's May 2022 and today we're making delicious and nutritious oven sweet potato fries. Let's get started. To make this recipe, we're going to need only 3 ingredients. Of course, sweet potatoes are number 1, right? But what kind of sweet potatoes? Well, it doesn't really matter. Any kind of sweet potato, any size, it just doesn't matter. But if you want to have those nice long fries, you're probably going to want to have a nice long sweet potato. So just make sure that there's no bruising or mold on it and you're good to go. Our second ingredient is going to be a nutritious oil. So I like to use olive oil or grapeseed oil, but probably what would be a great idea, and I have done this quite often, is to use a high heat oil if possible. So I have bought like an olive oil that was a high heat olive oil, and it worked just fine. The kind of oil you're going to use is really up to you, but we try to use something that's a healthful, very healthful oil, and these are the 2 that we use. The third ingredient we're going to use today, which is totally optional, is salt. Now, I like to use Himalayan pink salt in my home, but it is saltier than the actual table salt. So I use about 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon of that salt on about 2 potatoes. The salt is actually up to you, but I have to tell you, when you bake the sweet potatoes this way with the oil coating, it is so delicious the way it comes out. The sweetness and the flavor of the sweet potato really comes alive, and you may not even want the salt. So just give it a try, because a lot of times I don't even use salt. It's just so good. Now it's time to wash our potatoes. So I like to wash the skins before I actually peel them, just to get all the mud off. And so then I cut the little ends off where they've been growing. I peel the sweet potatoes, and then I'm getting ready to cut. Now, how you cut your sweet potatoes is entirely up to you. But if you want to have those really long fries, I would recommend that you use a really long sweet potato, because you're going to want to cut it in lengths. The thing is to cut the sweet potatoes so that they're 1/4 inch, because the sweet potato is full of water, and when it gets into the oven, it's going to start to kind of dehydrate. So you want to make sure that you have enough meat of that sweet potato that when it lessens in volume, you still have a nice meat to that potato. So the actual cut doesn't really matter. It's up to you. What do you like? If you want to have the long fries, cut them that way. But you know, a lot of times I'm in such a hurry to move on. There's so much to do on the homestead that I'm usually trying to find the fastest way possible. And because I make these oven fries fairly regularly, what I do is I just cut my potato in half, I cut it in quarters, and then I slice it that way. And you want to make sure that if your slices are really wide, that you cut them once or twice depending on the slice, so that you have that 1/4 inch all the way around if possible. Now, how you slice them, it's up to you. You can have them as fry shapes, you can have them quartered, it doesn't matter as long as that 1/4 inch. So sometimes I even slice my potatoes like discs, because I'm just in such a hurry, I just want to get to it. So I just take that peeled potato and I just start cutting from the end, 1/4 inch slices. And then what I do is, if they're too big, I just slice those in half. Now it's time to set the oven. So I like to turn my oven on to 400 degrees. It takes about 6 minutes for it to heat, and that gives me just enough time to finish the prepping. Now, your oven's going to be different than mine, so you're going to have to check it as you go and see what kind of results you get. Then once my potatoes are cut, what I do is I toss them into a bowl, and I use anywhere from 1/2 to a full tablespoon of oil. It just depends on how many potatoes I have in the bowl. In this picture, I think it's about 2 or maybe 3 potatoes. But when I toss it, if there's a lot of extra oil in there, what I do is I just leave that oil, and my next batch of potatoes goes straight in there without putting any more oil in it. The thing is that less is more when you're making these potatoes, because if you use too much oil, you're going to see a lot of evaporation happening during the cooking process, which is just wasted, and you might see smoke outside of your oven. But the other thing is that you're going to end up with a soggy potato. So we've actually found that less is more when you're adding the oil. Once my potatoes are oiled in the bowl, then I start spreading them onto my trays. And I like to leave a little bit of space because if I'm going to flip the potatoes, I want to be able to get my tongs in there, my fork, or whatever it is. So now that they're on the trays, I'm going to use that 1/4 to 1/2 inch salt in my hand, and I'm going to lightly sprinkle the salt over the potatoes. Now it's time to put them in the oven. So I like to put my potatoes in the oven for maybe a good 15 minutes before I start turning them. And I would then turn my potatoes and then put them back in for another 5 to 10 minutes until I get that crispiness. Now the best way to test is to give it the eye test and just look at it and see if it's looking a little browned and a little bit crispy. And the other way to test is to taste. And you can find out then if it's too soft or you need to go a little longer. Now here's the problem. When you pull them out of the oven, I don't know that they're going to make it to your table. My challenge is they're so good when they come right out of the oven that I start eating them before they hit the plate. So good luck with that. Well, that's it for today. So long, friends, and see you next time on the Bayou Homestead.